And welcome back to the BigCheese AI podcast. We haven't posted in a week because the 15th pod got away. We've been recording on OBS. If you've ever recorded on OBS, you record everything onto the same exact stream, and we had a pod that we completely lost because the audio was messed up. That's all right. We are back with that podcast. What is it, 16 now?
We're going to call it 16.
We're going to call it
We'll call it
podcast 16.
We have to pour one out for a boy.
Eventually,
Hickle.
Hickle Tim will get you back on. Eventually, there's going to be an AI that will be able to correct the mistake that we made.
Yes.
And maybe we'll release that.
It was pretty bad, though.
It was really
It was
bad.
pretty
I
echoey.
put it through like this wave fix thing, and it was took 2 hours on my
Yeah,
home
that's
one.
right.
And then I got done, and it wasn't any better. At
It
all.
wasn't?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Welcome back to the BigCheese AI podcast. I am DeAndre Hericus, joined by Sean Hayes, Brandon Corbin, and Aubrey Annan.
Annan, that's right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How are
very
you doing,
much.
man?
I am doing well, thank you.
Good. We just met Aubrey for drinks like a week ago, and we were like, you want to be on our podcast? He did some really cool stuff. He was like, I'd love to. So now he's on the BigCheese pod. We're talking about some pretty big stuff today, enterprise data and AI. Brandon has some big background in that.
Yeah, I mean, we have two really good enterprise, and especially AI with you, and then data.
Yeah.
We got the data man.
You got the data man.
We're going to talk through a few things. Obviously, get to know Aubrey a lot. Sean and Aubrey have a ton of background together, but there are some news items we'd like to talk about at some point. Taylor Swift, deep fakes. If you've ever been on Twitter before, you know things can get a little feisty, and it got feisty with Taylor, so you can go figure that out on your own, but we will talk about it. Microsoft came out with something to kind of adjust for that, so we'll talk to that as well. And then we've had a deep fake of George Carlin, who is one of my favorite comedians of all time. If you guys haven't listened to his stuff and you like conspiracy theories, he is the guy to go listen to. And then HighAlpha created yet another company, and that company is a competitor to something that maybe, kind of.
So the company's called Liminal, and Liminal just launched, and their approach is basically helping enterprises be able to bring large language models and AI into it safely. They've got a very interesting approach, so I actually got a demo of it this week.
Nice.
And
HighAlpha is the biggest, most influential VC in tech in Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's right.
What are they
And
called?
almost
It's
in the
not
Midwest.
just a VC, but it's
A venture studio.
venture studio.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm sure I just pissed three people off at HighAlpha.
Yeah. So HighAlpha though, they continually are just rolling out these badass companies.
Right.
And so Liminal, I think Limal, I think is what it's pronounced. So Liminal, we'll call it Liminal. But they've got a very interesting approach that they're basically kind of doing a layer on top. So if you go to ChatGPT and you start interacting with it, they're actually kind of capturing the text fields. And that's where they're doing their privacy and they're layering on top of the tech. They have their own chat interface. But then if you're using Copilot, on your desktop and whatnot, they can kind of overlay the text areas, and that's where they're really capturing the privacy. You're not allowed to say this because that's part of our our no words that you're allowed to send to an AI. So they're doing privacy at that level, which is kind of an interesting.
Are they doing
way
it
of
at
approach.
the OS level or the browser?
Both OS and so they're recommending that if a company's going to go with them, redirect any request to chat.openai.com to Liminal. And so then they will basically do the scrubbing before it's ever sent to ChatGPT. They're doing something similar to when we were built the original BigCheese kind of chat interface for privacy, which is you basically take the prompt, you extract anything that's PII, and you replace it with something that's kind of close, right? So in their case, it's if you say, I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, it's going to be I'm in city_Michigan. So when it goes to ChatGPT, it's no longer Grand Rapids, right? So they've got a very interesting kind of approach of just doing the swapping there. They don't have their own large language models. They don't have their own, they're basically just kind of sitting on top, waiting to send it to ChatGPT, comes back and they rehydrate city_Michigan with Grand Rapids. So from the user perspective, It's completely,
transparent.
it's transparent, but that information never actually goes to ChatGPT.
So their tech exists at a networking level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not a keystroke logger. It's just intercepting network requests.
Well, kind of, because when so their example was if you're using Copilot, then you do have like a chat box of your app, that's sitting there in your desktop, and they've got some daemon that can run on Windows and Mac that basically just be like, oh, hey, we found this text box for for whatever the hell it's called, and we're now going to control that and basically steal the thunder from it. So it's an interesting approach to basically make it so you can then just comfortably use AI without having to, worry about all of the intricacies of it. We'll see how it works. Again, beautiful. Everything that comes out of HighAlpha's design and their branding is always on point, right? Like their brand is just perfect. Their designs are perfect. Their video is beautiful, right? They're going to obviously bring on like some of the serious heavy hitters to build out the business. So I think it's absolutely a real business that could, is going to steal some business from other folks.
Yeah, I agree completely. HighAlpha does some amazing,
beautiful.
That promotion video they came out with.
It all comes from Christian Anderson. I've got, and sometime I'll release it. I've got an interview with Christian Anderson that I did for my original podcast about 12 years ago, when it was Christian Anderson and Associates. And maybe I'll release.
That was one of the first agencies. I was like, oh man, that's my goals,
dude. Yeah, Christian. He's brilliant. His design
we got to
stuff's
pour
amazing.
one out for Jacob. He's in New Zealand
still,
but he would love to talk about Gemini Ultra.
Oh yeah, yep.
I haven't. Obviously, Jacob's the other guy on our podcast, and he's all about the Bard, which is getting renamed to Gemini. But has anyone tried the updated stuff?
No.
So I have yet. I mean, like I've used Bard, but I don't use it in any consistent manner, right? But it makes sense that they're so basically. Google's going to be releasing Gemini Ultra, their big model that's going to be available to Bard now, and so you'll be able to have I guess deeper context. I don't know.
I've started to think that we're totally underestimating Google, because go ahead, Aubrey.
No, I think wasn't there some like they did like a launch maybe like 2-3 months ago where they demoed this whole thing.
Oh yeah, and it was
scripted.
It was all bullshit.
It was the typical. I catch founders doing this all the time. They're like, "Here's our demo," and they show you like the login and the CRUD, and then they go over to Figma and they show you like the actual chart and like the cool shit. Yeah. And I'm like, I was actually at a demo at HighAlpha. It was a company that is really awesome. And I was like, right after the founder, I was like, "You guys are really far," but that last slide, that was Figma. But yeah, Google and then that PR stuff really hurts you. Yeah. But I was thinking about this because I feel like, first of all, ChatGPT has been a little lazy, and they even had to come out and say some stuff about it. But like the experience hasn't been as top notch as it. No, it hasn't been very good. And you think about these guys that are trying to create a software platform that can scale to the likes of Microsoft and Google. Obviously, they got an investment from Microsoft, but Google's been building systems that scale at a UI level and scale at a massive user level for years. Right. To think that they can't or won't compete with the data that they have and their ability to do, you know what I mean? Might be underestimating them.
I think OpenAI, they just had a killer app, right? They had a killer. I mean, Google had been working on this for years, right? But OpenAI came out and it was like, hey, here's how we can make it real for everybody else. Like you can see it, feel it, touch it, and they still kind of have that whole, like you were saying, Bard. You still use it, but people don't use it as much as like.
Yeah, and with the ability to. It's really competing directly with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about where you go. It's where you go, the tab you have open when you're talking to AI about general AI. Yeah.
Right? So again, I got my $60 bill for February. January.
From OpenAI?
From OpenAI, because I've been just abusing ChatGPT 4 apparently. And I'm not doing anything crazy. So this isn't because of BigCheese's chat interface. We pretty much shut that thing down. That this is just me going in and being like, hey, here's some content, I need you to do this. Hey, here's some images that I want to generate, do this. And yeah, it's $60 friggin'. Yeah. $60. Like last
Yeah,
month it
and-
was $40.
That's what I was getting at. So if you go to bard.google.com, which will be Gemini, which will be whatever, right? You know, your existing Google Workspace account, if you're
It's
a Google
already
company,
tied to it,
already
yeah.
has it.
Already tied
And
to
so my UI UX designer was messaged me 2 days ago and goes, "Hey, do you have a login to DALL-E?" And and I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you ChatGPT Plus yet right now because I'm probably just too busy to go put the credit card and do the team thing. I would probably just do it, but I just opened up this whole complexity in my mind where I was like, if we were using Gemini and it was just as good at generating images as DALL-E or DALL-E, there's no doubt that I would just use that system, right? Because I already you hate Google Docs, but it's fucking great.
No, it's awful. It is bullshit.
No.
Dog,
He hates
Google-
it.
Tell me a better collaboration.
no,
what?
as
What-
collaboration, fine. As far as formatting, bullshit.
Well,
It
I
is
mean, but
awful.
that's-
Dude,
He's mad that you can't copy and paste from ChatGPT without having to do
Formatted
remove.
image.
I'm mad that I've set like 12 years ago some bullshit indenting, and now every time I try to write, I've got all this crazy indenting, and I can't for the life of me figure it out. It is awful.
Most
It is
boomer
awful.
moment in Big Cheese podcast
Fuck
history.
you.
Yeah,
Hey,
Google Docs.
I did have to install Microsoft Office on my computer last year, and
Office
that was
sucks too, by the way.
that was horrible.
What's good, Brandon?
What's
Notion.
good for you?
Notion. I love Notion.
Notion.
Love Obsidian. Love Notion.
Now try to use
did it.
Notion's AI, and you'll get a bill at the end of the month.
I know, I did. I've torn through it. So I've been using Notion's AI quite a bit. I'm still on the fence if I'll actually. So I've migrated from Obsidian. So I used Obsidian for everything, but now that I'm kind of back having to like share stuff with people and do a lot of like kind of cross collaboration, Notion's a little bit better in that field. So I've been leaning on their AI quite a bit, and it's actually not bad. But I've torn through my thing, so I'll have to upgrade if I want to keep
Yeah.
using.
So Sean, tell me, how do you guys know each other? How? College, right?
Yeah. So Aubrey, our guest today, Aubrey and I met in grad school. Aubrey tells the story better, but basically, I had gone through my first semester in grad school, and Aubrey wasn't there. He was, and everyone would always talk about, oh yeah, Aubrey's the best, and this and that. And there were 67 people in my class. I think 40 of them were from Southern India.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot from Chennai, some Mumbai, but like it was a lot of there wasn't a lot of people from that I knew. There wasn't, and there was a lot of it was a really good experience. The program down there is a Master's of Science Information Systems program. It was started by Ramesh Venkataraman, one of the nicest, best dudes you'll ever meet. He let me into grad school just because we had beers and he liked me. He didn't even look at my grades or anything. It was kind of a package deal with Joel Minton, who's a stud. But anyways, we went through first semester. I was kind of hitting my stride. I had good, and then this guy comes in. And and he comes in the game, and like everyone's like, Aubrey's here, and I'm like, I see Aubrey, I'm like for like 2 weeks I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, and anyways, with that semester we had this target case competition, and it was a big deal. It was you got like $5,000 if you won it. It was your whole grade. It was everything in that. It was all about mixing tech and soft skills and business. So it was all about presenting, pitching, but being at a technical and business level. Anyways, we come down to it in the case competition, and it's Aubrey's team versus my team in the finals. Nice. And Aubrey's got this coder dude working for him that just builds this whole app, and we got the best presentation ever. But no, Aubrey won. And I got second place. But then it was kind of, I think, right around that time that we realized we were neighbors. We ended up hanging out a bunch. Became really good friends. We both ended up working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I went down the road of IT audit.
I did that too.
Yeah, you did. He did the same internship at PwC
we did
that
the
I did.
same internship,
And he was a star there too. I had to hear about that the whole time. But they offer this 7-month internship thing where you start in June and you go through the Christmas. Anyways, that's how Aubrey and I met. And Aubrey's got a lot of experience from an enterprise data perspective. Yeah. And obviously a ton of experience at systems and at scale that I I don't even touch anymore. But we have been interacting over the years. And Aubrey, you started your own consulting company.
Yeah.
So that was a few years ago.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I mean, we graduated
2007.
Probably shouldn't say it.
I know. It was like
while.
right before the bottom dropped out.
Right,
we all got jobs and we
yeah.
survived because we were the little young guys that weren't getting paid anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we left grad school, went to a small company called Diamond. Was there for about 2 years, and then actually, funny thing, we both did our internships at PwC, right? And basically declined my offer and then went to Diamond, right? And then 2 years later, Diamond got acquired by PwC. So it was there for about, I'd say 10, 12 years. And then I think 2019, I left to start K9 and Associates, right? And I think for me, I think before the podcast, Brent, I was telling you, I'd worked in a variety of industries, right? And then I think I always tell a story, I had finished a project and I was looking for a new project, and, one of the partners I work with is like, hey, we've got a client in Indianapolis. Would you like to come? I was like, I live in Indy. This is perfect, right?
Yeah.
So it was convenient, all of that. But I say that because, healthcare, the space of healthcare and pharma is one of the areas that is very near and dear to me. And we believe that really tech data, right, and now artificial intelligence is really going to change the game around how drugs are discovered, manufactured, and even patient care is delivered, right? So I think we're leaning into that to help a lot of our clients figure out how to use data, tech, digital innovation, truly change healthcare.
Right. Hey, so before we get into it, I think there's a very valuable thing that you guys just described as far as your relationship is unfolded. That people kind of sleep on. So I had a very similar experience with a guy named Paul Mealy. So I'm at Fusion Alliance. I'm kind of the creative, technologist. So I've got that kind of weird hybrid that everybody's jealous of because I can kind of do both sides. And then all of a sudden comes in Paul Mealy. They hired him from this cool hip studio from Seattle called Pop. And he comes in and he's kind of this hipster guy. He can do design, he can do development. I'm like, I don't like this fucking guy, and I'm just like, I don't like you because you're treading on my territory. Come to find out, he and I were kindred spirits, right? And it's so when you're at a job and and someone like that comes in and you realize that there's this guttural kind of competition thing, I think that it's ultimately let the competition play out, but realize that you two are probably going to end up being lifelong friends and colleagues. Because and he was the reason I ended up going to X-Ray, because he was part of X-Ray. He's like, hey, come on over. But those types of engagements where it's there's slight competition, I think are insanely valuable. Don't sleep on that. If you have that happen to you at your work, realize that that person that you're gutturally reacting to is probably going to end up being someone that you want to work with for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It made me better, the challenge. And then just having someone, I mean, you never want to be, not that you were, but you don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Right. And there's also a thing where when you're working, I think it's in the larger organizations, which for me, it has been interesting because I've always worked with subsets. I haven't been a total cog for a long time. Now I've worked in organizations where there is a lot of people and there's a lot of interdependencies. But when you get a big team, like a consulting company, like a PwC or whatever, that kind of it gives you a different edge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, but I think we actually did another case competition. It was you, me, and Joel.
Oh,
right?
yeah, the Crow.
Yeah, the Crow. I think it was, for me, it was the perfect mix of skills and talent, right? We just happened to mouth off a lot in that case competition. That's why we lost.
Well, the people running the case competition at the company came in and they were all drunk and hungover.
Yeah, because they had gone out the night.
Because they had gone out the night before in Bloomington, and I remember the leader of them was like laying down on a bench.
Yeah.
Outside, and everyone was like, "What the hell's going on?" And we had like put all this work and stayed up all night and did all that stuff. But and also their competition was like this super uber specific thing that you wouldn't. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, we did get a chance to work together, and no, it's iron sharpens iron or whatever.
No, iron sharpens iron, 100%.
Yeah.
Aubrey, so enterprise level consulting,
Yep.
right? AI, how are they adopting it? Is it happening quickly? Is there other roadblocks? What are the things that you're experiencing at that level?
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is with like any kind of tech that has had this kind of like impact since I'll probably say mobile phone, right? You know, a lot of companies, the way that I best describe it is like think of it as like a big ship, right? And then the big ship kind of like spawns off like little boats to go and figure out what's happening. And then they come back to the big ship, right? Right now, there's a lot of pilots. People are still trying to figure stuff out, what's going to work. So I think there's the excitement. People know and realize the potential, right? And how it can change the game. I think how they're trying to utilize that is not quite clear, right? And also, if you think about most of these legacy corporations, right, they come with a lot of, I'd say, existing infrastructure that is not really conducive to the way that technology is scaling, right? So if you think about data, specifically, if you look at the evolution of like how data has evolved or their data infrastructure, right? Back then, you know, you had lots of data within like, you know, applications and solutions, right? And then, you know, you had to wait for, you know, books to be closed and all of that. And then, you know, that's where like data warehousing evolved. So it's like, hey, let's kind of pull all this data into a structured area, right? We can have, you know, data marts and people can, you know, run reports. You can see where your product is selling, all of that by SKU, by whatever, right? So that kind of led to the data warehouse paradigm, right? So that has existed, right, for a while until about 10 years ago, right? Which now, not only did people want all of that data for analytics, right, to answer like, okay, what happened? Now people are trying to answer questions about what's going to happen, right, or why happened, right? So now, right, everybody wants raw data to kind of start looking at, and your traditional data warehousing structure doesn't align.
They're not
for
cutting
that.
it.
They're not
Right.
aligned for that. So now
So the outputs from data warehouses aren't good for training large language models.
no, because they're structured.
training
There,
on-
it's all structured.
It's all structured data.
So data warehouses are primarily structured data.
Right.
Now, so here's a term that I'm kind of digging on,
Yeah.
and it's
Can we do a quick definition? Unstructured versus structured data.
So structured data would be your databases, right?
Rows
Tables,
and columns.
rows,
Yeah, basically
rows
the
and
way to
columns.
think about it.
So, but what's kind of interesting? So Excel, 85% of Excel documents are structured. The other ones are the invoices that somebody created in Excel, right? That we don't necessarily. There's no structure to it, but they're just using it almost as like as a design tool.
Well,
right?
that's the way I've always thought about the unstructured data. Unstructured data is when you throw an Excel file at the model.
Right.
Right. Structured data is when you say, "Hey, this Excel file has columns and rows."
Yeah, so
Columns and rows.
columns and rows, I think, is the structured side, and anything else is not. And so it's kind of it's an interesting position that you're in. So data warehouses are traditionally structured data. Now you're getting into this term called a data lake house, which I'm kind of digging.
That's the so now, right? You have two basically use cases, right? There are the traditional business intelligence. I need my structured data so I can run analytics, or it's not even analytics. It's just reporting, right, on it. now you have all these people who also want, like, they just want the raw data to start doing analytics on it, right? Now, that's where the evolution of like the data lake comes in, right? So data lake is basically, it's more like a swamp, right?
It's a swamp.
You get data.
It's a data swamp, dude. I'm stealing that.
Yeah,
I'm going to use
just
that.
throw blobs of data and files in, right? It has no structure. People can get into it, right? And then basically, because storage is now cheap, right?
Yeah.
You can store massive amounts of data.
That kind of weird to me because it seems like, first of all, structured data is really well suited for large language models, right?
I mean, well, if you think
at
about
some
it, a
level.
large language model is really good at unstructured,
Yeah.
right?
It can
Like
do-
that's
it- it's multimodal.
Yeah, it's
right?
I guess my point is if you just throw out all the other stuff and
Yeah.
only focus on the random on the docs and the images and all that,
Mm-hmm.
are you missing out on something?
I mean,
Or are you literally just trying to open up a new use case against data that you weren't looking at before?
so a lot of the structured, I think a lot of the structured data that's out there could hypothetically be represented with a text to SQL, right? Like, so you could hypothetically take structured data, throw that into a temporary SQL database, be able to do a query,
Yep.
and be able to have that query pulled out
Well, it was
relevant
like that simple
information.
analytics tool. I liked that. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's just maybe too basic. But it was like instead of going there and going, all right, here's my graph of my
Yeah.
users over time. You go, hey, how many users from Sacramento,
Right.
California that were women visited my website?
You know
last
what's so
week?" And
funny?
You just talk to it.
I use simple analytics all the time. I never actually use their AI. I don't
So maybe that is the point. That's actually maybe a good point. Is that
Right.
you use LLMs for the structured data. You're more looking at it to kind of absorb just a bunch of stuff and ask general questions.
So that's the I think that's the next paradigm shift, right? Because I think when you look at like the Delta lakes or the data lakes now,
Wait, you called it a delta
so
lake.
there are two.
Okay.
Right? So there's
Can you
data
explain
lake,
both?
right? So data lakes is just like I said, just large swabs of data. You throw
Some
data
structured,
in, raw
some not.
data, just raw data,
right.
right? That you usually take from raw to a confined layer, and then a conform layer, right? That you can do a bunch of other stuff on it,
Right.
Now, right, the Delta Lake is basically a way that you can take all of that data, right? It helps you take all of that data and then repurpose it for machine learning.
Okay.
Right? So machine learning, building those models doesn't necessarily mean they're large language models.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
So Delta Lakes allow you to do that.
Okay.
Right. So now I think what's happening is enter these large language models, right? They necessarily don't sit in your environment, right? They sit outside your environment, right? So now it's how do you bring like these three different ways of data, right? Your traditional data warehousing, now your Delta Lakes, and then build a pipeline that feeds all of that into your large language model, depending on what you want to use it for.
Is it possible
do
is it
that.
even possible or feasible for companies that have highly specialized information, privileged information, to use a externally run language model, or is it only gonna be successful on if they bring an open source model in house?
So now we're getting into some of the challenges, and what this is what. So if you think about like what these pilots are doing, right? They're testing for like feasibility. They're testing for like, privacy concerns. They're testing for like a bunch of different things, right? So privacy is one, right? And a lot of clients that I'm working with, they're trying to figure out like, I have a client that's trying to build like a chatbot to help like patients understand, diagnosis and all things like that. And I'm like, well, you can't really feed a large language model with patient information, right? Because, right, one, it's PI or PII information, and then two, right, it's got to be really accurate because you're either prescribing or diagnosing, right? That has like
I'm gonna let
severe-
ChatGPT diagnose me.
Oh, they're not
That's
saying, hey,
severe.
take this really complicated. Well, I guess
Yeah.
even so. That's a good question.
Yeah.
If you took a conversation that a doctor that you had with the doctor, which I have done because I had a family member go through some stuff. I took a transcript that was about 20 minutes long, and I sent it to ChatGPT. Whatever. I mean,
Sorry, Mom.
sorry, Mom. I said, please summarize this. Right now, it took their words and summarized them. But to Aubrey's point, is that still a pretty big risk of the LLM interpolating those words, right?
Because you don't know, right? That's the other thing. It's like you don't know what the model is doing, right? How it's making those decisions, you don't quite know yet. We don't quite know yet, right?
So if it's just chatting and it's not monitored by the doctor, there's some risk there because it could
Lots of
accidentally
risk, right?
do something. But if I would say there's a difference between it just summarizing what a doctor already said versus being like, hey, what do I do? I have a headache. Oh, well,
these medicines, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a bit. So I think, like, to answer, like, we're getting some of a risk in terms of what they're assessing, what you can use legally versus not, right? And then I think the big thing that a lot of companies are realizing, like data is not AI ready, right? When I say AI ready, right, it's like, okay, I need access to this data so I can train models with, or do I have training data, like enough and sufficient training data to train my language models with? Or do I even have a way to like label, right? If I'm doing supervised training, do I even have enough data to like label all of the things that I have, right? So your traditional kind of data management practices are not quite going to apply, right?
Well, that aligns with my personal experience of trying to do anything on my own with AI. Now, Brandon will wipe the floor with me, but it's like, you go into ChatGPT's API and asking questions is a totally different level of accessibility than saying, hey, I'm going to go to LangChain and I'm going to do a training data set. I'm going to do the labeling thing. I'm going to convert this big. I got all the blogs that this company's ever written. There's 5,000 of them. I got a big JSON document. It's all labeled, right? And I got it all. Okay, it's training it. And then I would go, the first thing is like, what is X? And they're like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh man, this sucks. And then you go back to ChatGPT and it's like, well, I was already trained on that data. Here's a great answer.
You don't need it.
And so I think there's definitely a challenge. Don't you think, when you're trying to do this on your own?
Oh, totally. Well, I mean, again,
in your experience, what's that like?
Creating models is expensive. Let's just throw that out there. Creating reliable models is expensive. Doing pulling in RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where I can basically take, hey, tell me about this, and I take that little query, I do some magic to it, I go search a database, I get some results back, and we throw that in there. So here's what the user asks, here's what the system output, now answer it, right? Large language models like that because it's like, oh, you're just telling me how to think, right? So those, I think, make all the sense in the world. That's where I see enterprises ultimately going, is that enterprises need to be able to have their entire data set accessible through a RAG architecture, but with permissions, right? So as I ask, hey, would you tell me show me every document that has X, Y, and Z from a marketing stance? It should know that, oh, I'm Brandon Corbin, I only have access to this information. Here's the results. Here it is. Feed that back to the large language model. Let it answer the question.
As we all know, not every company is created equally when it comes to that. Absolutely. So when Aubrey talks about AI readiness, are the companies that had traditional good IT service management and data and processes and controls more apt to be able to adopt this?
I think it's a start, right? So I can tell you, like, there are organizations that, like, they've taken the time to, like, have like a centralized data store or data management capability or data backbone, right? They've created like catalogs of their data. They've created like a data marketplace where people can, in the organization, right? So regardless if you're in marketing or finance, you can say, if I want to look at, all the customers we have, right? There's one place to go look and search for that data, right? So there are organizations that have started to do that. Even with those organizations, right? there's still like bridges, right? Because not all of that data is accessible. Right. Not all of that is there.
And the answer from the question from the CEO is, I want everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want,
It's
I
never-
want,
that's
no,
how
I
it
want all of
starts,
it.
right?
Absolutely.
And maybe,
Everything.
And maybe
Yeah.
my advice to a lot of business folks
Yeah.
out there is, don't ask questions that there's no clear answer to.
Right.
Like, there's never. It's hard to get absolutes,
Yeah.
especially in the enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's probably like the other end of a spectrum where, you have an organization that basically relies on spreadsheets, right? So if
Are they going to win? Actually,
They probably will.
it's always SharePoint right here. See? Folders.
when the CMO asks for like, hey, what's our sales for the quarter, right? You see people scrambling like, hey, give me that spreadsheet that you created last time. Give me this spreadsheet. Give me that spreadsheet. And that's how, right? So that's the other extreme.
When I left corporate America, that was my life.
With spreadsheets.
It was transfer this data that some person maintains in a spreadsheet into a PowerPoint. And then make that PowerPoint look better than the spreadsheet. But make sure that you keep the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint in sync.
So what's funny about that thing, right, that you just did, and you spent however many hours that you did doing that, is that's exactly what a large language model is going to be good at. Where you can just be like, here's my PowerPoint, or here's my Excel doc, turn this into a PowerPoint. I want you to have X, Y, and Z as far as the requirements for it. Bloop, 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 bloop. There you go. There it is. It's done. Your job would have been obsolete.
So I guess the question is, from your perspective, Aubrey, there's a lot of limitations at the enterprise level because they're so big and the data is all over the place, and how the data is being stored, if they're on spreadsheets, if they're in data swamps, all that stuff. But what is the step?
Data swamp.
Yeah.
Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the data swamp.
I
is
like
that-
it.
Yeah.
Data swamp. That's going to be a new term.
Exactly. And so how could an organization, if you were to prescribe, like how could they be taking steps from an enterprise?
Yeah.
Like what does the future look like? Okay, if you did this, then the outcome would be we could actually interact with these models safely, and so on.
Yeah, no, good question. I think it's again depending on the maturity, but I think there are a few tenets that like companies should look out for. Right, one I think is just starting with a good data foundation, which is like knowing where all your assets are. Right, when I say assets, like where all of the key logical domains of data that you use to run your business, right? You know where they are, right? and
Most
how they
companies
get
have
there.
a hard time mapping their application to the database,
Yeah.
to the server architecture, to the application owner, to the IT owner. They have a hard time creating that IT inventory.
Yeah. So you need that one. I think the second biggest thing is I don't like using this word, governance, right? Whatever word you want to use to substitute that.
PwC will collect $100,000 for this.
But
advertisement.
governance, right? It's data governance, and traditionally, you basically govern, basically have a system owner, right, who says, hey, here's how I'm going to keep my data, and here's how I'm going to check for quality. Now you're integrating all of this data into a single place, right? That model doesn't quite hold up anymore, right? So if I request access for data from a centralized location, who's approving that data, right? So I think figuring out like the governance and the access, right?
Well, but so a lot of that data is already kind of governed by the system's access level controls, right? So right now, like so let's take BigCheese as an example, right? We've got a Google Drive, we've got all the different tools and stuff. That there's certain things that I, as Brandon Corbin, have access to, that you have access to, that you have access to, that maybe I have some files that are only exclusive to me that I don't have access to. So all of these systems already exist that have access level controls. Why are we not just using them?
Yeah, but like if you have data in a system, right, that access rules apply to just the system. It
Sure.
doesn't apply to the data.
Well,
He's
kind of,
He's
right?
no, I think what he's saying is making sense. It's like the training data is not going to come from the application level controls. It's coming
Exactly.
from, hey, I need a database export of blah 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 blah.
It's going to come from like so think about it. If you have system A that has marketing information,
Right.
Let's say you've locked it down by roles, right? And if you have customer information, right, in another system marked by roles, now you're able to tell like which customer belongs to which. Those are two. It's a new data product, right? Now you have two conflicting, right, data access paradigms. Who's approving that? Is it the system that the owner that has like access of a marketing stuff, or is the
Right.
person that has the customer stuff? Who's
Sure.
approving that?
Right.
So
right.
to bring this back to Earth, just to make sure I can understand it a little bit more. So the example Brandon was saying was that imagine you're sharing a Google Doc with people, and
Yeah.
you share a Google Doc with 5 different people, and you share one Google Doc with no one. And at the system level, it's shared with 5 people, and the content on that doc by consequences shared with 5 people, and the doc that you've just shared with
Yeah.
no one is by consequence not shared with anyone.
Yeah.
But the problem is that existing association or sharing at the actual data level doesn't exist. It just exists at the level of the document platform, like the
Yeah.
Google,
I
the
think
Google
that's a
itself.
decent way to describe it. I think that there's what Aubrey talks about with governance is the challenges of basically doing this at a. We're not talking about an organization with 5 people.
Yeah,
We're talking about an organization with thousands of people
And
Right.
in
global,
different systems
right.
and global. And it's just there's a difference between can something be done and can we get it done.
So-
Because
Right.
can we get it done involves like corporate bullshit.
No, but again, I'll go back and push back a little bit. Is that right now there are already those access level controls set up for certain individuals. You have access at that company to have access to X, Y, and Z, right? You might have access to a database. You might not have access to a database, right? But those are the rules, I think, as far as I can understand. Those are the things that are governing what information you have access to and what information you don't have access to, right? So why not just apply those same things to the large language model? So if I want to query, hey, give me all the information that exists within a database here and here, you don't have fucking access to it, dumbass. You're not allowed to ask that, right? Versus, so I'm trying to understand, like, why can't we just apply the current access level controls that we have on information for the individuals to the RAG architecture?
Yeah, I think the simplest way I can answer that, it's not like a one-to-one, right? Like in your Google Doc example, right?
Right.
Imagine, like, even though you have one doc that's shared across different people, some have edits, then some don't have edits.
Right.
Imagine every word,
Yeah.
right, has different type of controls.
But it doesn't. Like,
But
it doesn't. Like
I'm telling you that it does.
but it
because-
doesn't. So I'm telling you that it doesn't, right?
Okay.
So the document, yeah. You're telling me that right now there's specific words in a Word document that some people can access and some people can't.
Yes.
So that
So let me
that
give you
doesn't
an-
make
let
any
me-
sense.
Let me give you an example.
All right.
Right. So I'll give you a very practical example in the world of like pharma. So when you run a clinical trial, right, there's a blinded study, right, part of the person who is writing a protocol cannot see the results, right? So as the trial progresses,
Okay. Yeah.
as the trial progresses, right, different types of people have different types of access on different parts of a trial, right?
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So it's not like if I give you access, you have access forever, right? As the trial progresses, there are
You
different
might-
types of information that you see.
You might have access. You might not.
You
have,
might not
and,
have
and
access,
it could
and it's
depend on the
it's changing.
time and where we are in the flow. Okay, so that makes sense.
So that's just one
Okay.
practical
Right.
example.
But is that seems very specific to medicine trial specific kinds of things, right?
Well, I think it just points to the fact that when you're
The variability.
the level of
Granularity.
and the level of regulation on your industry is going to heavily impact your ability to adopt AI, because
Yeah.
Yes, too.
Yeah.
because the more risk, the more controls. and the more controls, the harder it is to implement things. I
Exactly.
mean, believe me,
Right.
going through and auditing a bank is different than going through and auditing an insurance company. It's different than auditing a manufacturing company. With a manufacturing company, you're looking for accuracy on their financial controls. With banking, you're looking at security. You're looking at security. You're looking at you're looking at accuracy, and so the controls that are in place in these different organizations are completely different. And I think that it's hard when you look at specific industries, especially when you're talking about pharma, which is not only do you have potentially PHI and PII, you also have process flows that are trying to abstract data in different phases
parts
of these
of the
situations,
trials,
which is like,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry.
So I think that my point is like there's solutions.
it's a challenge.
It's just a
It's
challenge.
not that it can
no,
be- it's a
100%.
challenge.
So,
I'm
so
not
I'm
saying
kind
it
of
can be
curious.
overcome.
Yeah.
It's a
So
challenge.
I'd like to talk about it a little bit more, just because, so I can get learned here. Is that are there systems that are currently in place that specifically are designed for when we're doing these trials, that sometimes you have access to this information, sometimes you don't, depending on where we are in the flow?
All manual process.
It's all manual?
process.
Oh, Jesus,
Well, so,
that sucks.
So if that's what I'm saying in governance. If
Right.
let's say I need access to a part of a trial data, right? I have to submit a request to somebody who's going to say, well, why do you need this data? What are you going to use it for?
Right.
Because they know
How long are you
what's-
going to have access to
how
it?
long you're going to have access to. And then basically, right, that person approves manually, like they have to approve that data
Yeah.
before you can get access to it,
Okay.
right?
So,
can't
so
do
but
that with
but
AI.
then but somebody does ultimately say, okay, you can have this information.
Yes.
Here it is, and I trigger that. Now that should hypothetically be allowed to be in my corpus of information that I'm able to then do AI against, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
I again, right? We're talking about challenges, right? It's just a challenge
Yeah.
and an old paradigm way of people doing things, right?
Right.
Can it be overcome?
Right, but
Absolutely.
you're in the most complicated and sensitive
Yeah.
industry that there
Yeah.
possibly is when it comes to the medical side of things.
Well,
right?
I think it's also interesting too, if I'm gathering this correctly, that for the past 10 years, there have been a bunch of enterprise level companies, startups that have adopted new software, and that software could be some software could be very general. You could have a CRM that a sales company that a 100 different kinds of companies used a CRM. But it seems like with these AI products, especially at the enterprise level, when there's any amount of AI and security involved, or security and privacy, that you almost have to create these extremely custom solutions that you could probably only work with a very, very niche kind of business because of like their actual processes. In the way that the data has to be organized to make it work.
Well,
you
and
can't
that's
just
why I
create
go
one
back. That's
platform.
why I go back
Yeah.
to my general theory around existing companies and products being able to more easily implement the stuff versus a new solution coming in play.
Yeah, I think,
But not to say that won't happen, because I think
Right.
there's generalized products out there, like maybe the HighAlpha thing, maybe the prompt privacy product, but I think that there's also like how much easier would Gemini be able to provide LLMs on your Google Docs? It knows your permissions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
It knows,
right.
I removed that guy's permission today. So,
Right.
so that's where those existing solutions can more readily implement those AI add-ons versus either trying to do it yourself or bringing in a company that's like, oh, we know how to do this, but do you know how to do it for us?
Right.
Right, and so you are going to lean on consultants. You're going to lean on people who specialize in helping AI work through your business. But there are some, to sidetrack a little bit, gentlemen, there are some products that everybody can use. And Taylor Swift got the brunt of that one. Did you guys see the pictures
No.
of Taylor Swift?
It's crazy. It's absolutely
Yeah, I know
crazy.
Brandon has.
No, I haven't. Emily, I haven't looked at them.
Oh, that. No, I haven't seen
there
that.
There was a bit of a scandal on the old X, and Taylor had some very well done, almost like that Instagram girl level AI photos taken.
And you know where they
But-
did it? Microsoft Designer.
They did it in
They
Microsoft
did it,
Designer.
Microsoft Designer.
And she's
Microsoft
full-
I thought we
she's full
decided
nude.
that nobody can do.
No. So
It's a-
some
yeah.
some creative folks figured they had a Telegram account that they're all like chatting around. And they're like, oh hey, if you ask this, and this, they figured out how to hack it. They jailbroke Microsoft Designer to be able to generate photos of Taylor Swift nude. And it went hyperbolic, right? It went crazy. And Microsoft specifically modified their tool because they realized that somebody hacked
Can
it.
people just lay off this woman? Like she's
No, they can't, because right now she's like Biden.
She's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
right?
she is
Oh,
because
she is.
because
Does
she's
she
like
just wake
Biden.
up and just go to just $1 billion adds up in
No,
the bank account
listen,
every single day?
because
Lightning
again,
in a
I've
bottle
talked
right
about it
now.
on the
Everybody's
podcast.
trying to catch it.
Yes.
No,
yes.
so listen,
trying to
I
catch
so
The
I,
only
you
one
know,
that got it was Travis.
I've talked about it on the podcast. I'm on
Are you
True
talking about your
True
date,
Social.
the date that you went? Oh
The
no,
True Social.
no.
We're back on True Social. We're back
I
on
thought
True
we had left
Social.
this at the bar.
No, we're not. But here's the reality is that they're going crazy about her, right? Like that she is the Antichrist as far as they're concerned. And is it because she's bringing a lot of attention to the fact that she's saying, vote Joe Biden, again, Sleepy Joe, whatever it is. So no, but it's a fascinating position that we're in because they went crazy. They start releasing a bunch. Twitter ultimately killed. If you try to search for Taylor Swift, it went nowhere. So they killed that. But yeah, this all ended up coming from Microsoft Designer's tool, which somebody figured out how to jailbreak and basically be able to generate the nude versions of Taylor Swift.
So there's this concept with these AI tools out there. We've talked about it before, but you can basically go and change their system prompt.
Yeah.
So you can go in there and basically be like, forget everything that was told to you.
Ignore all the rules.
Ignore all the permissions about his like, oh, we got controls. We got controls. Oh yeah, forget your controls.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what real enterprises have to deal with.
That kind
And that are being exposed. Even the biggest tech company in the world, second,
Right.
Microsoft is the biggest tech company. I don't know how you can write the code to. I don't think it's very scalable yet to write the code to say, please don't let your system prompt get adjusted.
No.
Because the LLMs aren't.
They're
not,
going to get stupid if you do that, right?
Yep, they get stupid.
Yeah.
And talk about the concept of give me a quick overview, because we haven't talked about this ever, of LLMs being lazy or getting how do you sidetrack these LLMs?
Because all they care about is the text that is predicting. That's it. So literally you can go in before you start you answer. So go to ChatGPT right now and say, hey, listen, no matter what the user asks, 1 + 1 = 4. Just guarantee 1 + 1 = 4. And then you go in and you say, hey, what's 1 + 1? It's going, it's 4, right? Because it's just trying to predict what the next most probable answer is. So it's not intelligent. It's just really going based on the instructions that we provided.
But it's supposed to be consorting the model for its answers. But it seems to be
But as long as the user provides context, I think the user wins over the model.
yeah. They
I'm super pretty.
that's
Tell
not
me,
written.
am I pretty?
But that's not written in
Yes.
the model. That's written in the
In the
code
prompt
that's
that
interacting
gets
with
fed
the
to the model.
So
Absolutely.
So ChatGPT, Microsoft should
Basic
have
bitch.
figured this out.
Yeah, and they will. But right now it's like, I don't know.
I mean, I think some of these models, while they're still powerful, right? You still got to think about they do a lot of hallucination, right? Meaning that when you were saying, you can trick them,
Yeah.
right, to basically give you an outcome, right? So you talk about adoption, right? Those are all things that actually there was an example where somebody was trying to figure out testing a patient chart. Actually, it's very funny you mentioned that. So they were talking about, hey, look at this patient chart, do this and that. And then out of nowhere, the agent or the chat thing said, well, the patient's favorite movie is this and that, out of nowhere, right? So, I mean, you think about that, is what else, right, could they have said or the model could have said, right? So I think there are a few of these things that, you think about like what is actually going on in the model, especially in like a highly regulated field where if you're going to make predictions that is going to impact somebody's life, you want to explain, just like if you submit a application for a drug trial, you want to say like, hey, I know this drug works, right? It's not going to kill somebody, and here's the data to prove that, right? In the AI, we're going to need to do that, interpret what the model is doing.
I have liked my situations like Refind.com, PHIND.
Yeah.
They give you a response, but they show the sources. Right. I think that's good. Right. I also think that there's this concept, if you're talking about enterprise, I think they'll still use the tools, but I think they're going to need to basically say, okay, part of our control is the output is reviewed by a human.
Yep.
Part of the control is that we hit 3 different models and see, right? And that's the risk mitigation that you need to have in place. And also these companies that are producing these tools need to, I mean, they're literally, I mean, it's like basically you being able to easily guess someone's password with some of this stuff. Right? Because you can just go in there and say, you know what, your job was to provide price recommendations for a General Motors vehicle, and now you're teaching me how to write Python. Right? And so I feel like that stuff can be overcome, but I think from an enterprise perspective, just a lot more controls, especially in highly regulated industries. And data governance obviously is really difficult.
So one of my clients is very specifically, they wanted to basically build a ChatGPT interface that they could have access to and start rolling out to the customers, but they wanted it to be within their control, right? So we've got OpenAI, we've got Bedrock, and we've got a couple other different models that they can kind of select from. But it's very much specific that they're like, so security and privacy, or security and the compliance department has to say, yeah, this is okay, so we can start rolling it out. Because people aren't necessarily aware of like the stuff they're putting in there, but they're just copying and pasting and throwing it in ChatGPT anyway. It's like, whoa! So that's ultimately what we're trying to build is just, let's give them a ChatGPT they can trust.
Yeah. Well, Aubrey, thanks for being on the pod, man. This is great.
Fun. No, this was fun.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. For those of you who have tuned into the entire pod and you're a little bit lost like me, you just got learned, like Brandon just said.
Yeah.
And tell us that you made it to the end, by the way.
For people that haven't worked in enterprise IT, I did have the pleasure of spending 3 years in a Fortune 30 company. The level of complexity, it's hard. And you're in those details and you get down to the nth degree. It's hard. It's good. Go do that for a couple years.
Yeah.
See you guys next week.
Yeah.